Digital 410 Productions proudly presents What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast with your host, Don Abernathy.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast, and I am your host, Don Abernathy. And always, I want to thank everybody for your continued support of our little World War II based podcast, and thank you guys for sharing us with your friends, and if you haven't done so, please do. You can share the link on our Facebook page, or maybe share the pages on our website at WTSP-WorldWar2.com, or you can tell your friends they can download us at Apple Podcast, Google Music, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere fine podcasts are available. And of course, you can support the show by going to WTSP-WorldWar2.com, using that Amazon link and signing up for Patreon, joining one of the tiers, and also buying a t-shirt. But we are getting ready to kick off here in Florida into the World War II reenacting season. We already had one or two events down here that I haven't participated in yet, but the big one coming up on my calendar is only a few weeks away, and that is the 75th anniversary of the Peleliu battles that's going to take place in Fort Morgan, Alabama. And the last couple of days I've been doing a lot of work trying to get the logistics done on that. We've had a lot of our guys here from Florida fall out who aren't able to make that event, but it doesn't matter. The event is going to go off. It's going to be successful. We have a lot more Japanese reenactors this year, which we're looking forward to. And so we hope to see some of you out there in Fort Morgan, Alabama. I know some of you are going to be there. And so if you're there, please track me down. And I have some WTSP World War II Lucky Strike based stickers I will happily give you as a thank you for supporting the podcast and doing everything that you do. Once again, the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast is recorded live, or obviously digitized live, in the At Computer studio in Cape Coral, Florida. At Computers is our key sponsor, with the exception of Amazon stuff and the Patreon stuff. But At Computers has been providing IT support for all of Southwest Florida since 2004. They can help you out with all your IT needs, whether it's expanding your network, two-form authentication, online backups, computer repair, tablet repair, laptop repair. And as always, if you don't live in Southwest Florida, as long as you have internet access, At Computers can help you. They can log into your computer remotely and help you with your issues. They can help tracking down problems with your websites. Anything you need help with that can be done remotely, they can help you. So give them a call at 239-283-1120 or go to act-capecoral.com. Big news in the World War II community. We all heard about a year ago, 2 years ago I think it was, one of our fellow living historians underwent some sort of surgery that required him to be bedridden for a few weeks. And he got to looking through some of his Pacific-based content, his Pacific Theater of Operations for that matter, and he discovered that one of the gentlemen who was identified as being the member of the Iwo Jima flag raising party was not in fact the correct person. That Marine had been misidentified. Well, as of October 16th, another Iwo Jima flag raiser was mis-ID'd, the Marine Corps confirms in a report. It's one of the most iconic images of World War II, a group of U.S. Marines raising the American flag at the Battle of Iwo Jima, and now the United States Marine Corps admits that it has long misidentified one of the service members who took part in the flag raising, 3 years after admitting a similar error. According to the NBC News, a team of historians recently determined that one of the Marines in the photo was Corporal Harold Pye Keller, not PFC Renee Gagnon. I apologize. As you guys know, I have a hard time with names. But yes, the Marine in the photo was in fact Corporal Harold Pye Keller and not PFC Renee Gagnon, as had long been believed. The correction comes 3 years after a previous inquiry found that another one of the flag raisers was PFC Harold Schultz and not the Navy Hospital Corpsman John Bradley, NBC reported. The image of the Marines raising the flag was captured in 1945 by the Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal, who won a Pulitzer Prize for the shot and was later the inspiration for the United States Marine Corps War Memorial statue in Arlington County, Virginia. Side note, here in Cape Coral, Florida, we have that same statue, and it's actually the second statue created from the same mold that is used in Arlington, Virginia. So we have basically the second original version of that statue. But back to the story. According to NBC, the latest correction of the list of flag-raising Marines resulted from a review by historians Stephen Foley, Dustin Spence, and Brent Westmeyer. was validated by investigators from the Marine Corps and the FBI. Without the initiative and the contribution of both private historians devoted to the preservation of our history and the FBI's Digital Evidence Laboratory, the Marine Corps would not have had this opportunity to expand on the historical records of the second flag raising on Mount Sariachi. With the recent correction, the list of 6 Marines in the iconic photo now includes Ira Hayes, Harold Schultz, Michael Stark, Harold Pike Keller, and Harlan Block, according to NBC. But the Marine Corps added that, in a sense, it doesn't matter which Marines are in the photo because the image represents the hard work, determination, and the sacrifices of all who served. Regardless of who was represented in the photograph, each and every Marine who set foot on Iwo Jima or supported the effort from the sea and air around the island is, and always will be, part of our Corps' cherished history, the Marine statement read. So it's interesting to find out, thanks to the efforts of fellow living historians, we are able to get the correct names out there so that the memories of these Marines and their families will be represented appropriately. And that's huge news, and I think it's great that we are getting the true facts out there. So once again, I thank you guys for all your support, and we got another interview with a veteran who was there, another Air Force pilot. So without any further ado, let's get to the interview.
And we are recording live remotely from beautiful Spring Hill, Florida. I have to say this is my first time out in Spring Hill. And being a Kentucky boy, I have to say the horse farms that are surrounding the area reminds me of a very dry Kentucky with some Spanish pines and palm trees. But we're out here for a good reason. I am sitting down with World War II vet George Peschen.
That's correct.
Got that right, George?
Yes, that's correct.
First and foremost, let me thank you for all of your time and allowing me to come out and invade your home and set up my studio here in your living room and just completely take over on this beautiful Saturday. And I hope all things are going well for you.
Very well, thank you.
So last weekend was your birthday, and your grandchildren went out onto social media and they asked people to send in birthday cards because you want to see how many birthday cards you can get for your 95th birthday. How many cards did you end up raking in?
About 100.
About 100? Probably took you all day to read all those, huh?
Oh, yeah, I had a lot of help.
Were you surprised at the age range of people who sent you cards?
Oh, yeah, I was surprised at the whole thing, really. I just hope we were forgotten by now.
No, you guys will never be forgotten. I mean, there's new books, new movies coming out monthly. I've had authors on this show. I've had producers on this show who are constantly just putting out media to make sure that that never happens. So let's go back a few years, shall we? Do you remember where you were on Pearl Harbor?
Oh, that's really going back.
Did you end up enlisting or did you get drafted?
I was drafted.
Drafted? What year were you drafted?
42, yeah.
What branch were you drafted into?
The Army.
The Army? Do you remember the feeling you got when you got the draft letter from the government telling you it was your turn to serve?
I was young, yeah, and I just took it by stride.
Yeah. Do you remember where your boot camp was? Where'd you go do your basic training at?
Atlantic City.
Atlantic City, up in New Jersey, huh?
Yeah.
How was that? Were you constantly trying to sneak out of camp to get down to the boardwalk?
I was in a Trademark hotel, and at one time that was elite, but when we had it was pretty bad shape.
Oh yeah, all run down.
They cleaned it up. They scrubbed the floors, CI'd the floors. That's not luxury. It's just you're into service.
Nothing back then was luxury. I mean, you're in a rundown hotel. You could have been in a cardboard cornice hut in a field somewhere waiting for the rain.
Well, I tried to a cadet, you know, and I was accepted to fly as a. But I got injured one day. I got hit in the eye, and they washed me out, and so they asked me, "Do I want to fly as a flight engineer?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do that."
Do you remember how you got injured?
If I'm not mistaken, that a chip came out of the engine. I was holding the fire extinguisher on the outside, safety, and a little flying chip came out and went in my eye.
Wow. And
they had I was very lucky. There was a surgeon within 20 miles of us. And I went up there and he told me I was very lucky that the chip came out. It was a little hook in one piece. and I know my vision wasn't affected.
Well, that's a good thing, because if your vision was affected, of all the branches of the military, the Army Air Corps is the one place you got to have
Good
great vision.
Yeah. So I came around good. And a flight engineer is, he stands up front between the pilot and co-pilot, calls off the airspeeds on takeoff, does anything that has to be done mechanical to the plane.
Okay.
Clear the bombs when they go out, and everything that has to be. Emergency generators is part of his job. So he has a pretty good sized job.
You're kind of like the producer on a radio show. Your job is to do all the things that the host can't do because they're flying a plane or, doing their job. And so while they're flying and the navigator's doing his thing, if something happens...
Well, if an engine would suddenly give trouble, as the engineer, it was my job to do something about it, then I'd feather it and turn the blade into the wind, and that would stop the engine. And we had that happen, and we had oil flowing out of the engine, but as soon as we stopped it, the oil stopped coming out. That's a safety factor.
Sure.
So I enjoyed being an engineer.
During basic training, when you had your injury and then asked if you want to be a flight engineer, obviously if you're doing the mechanical side of the plane, you got to do a lot more, I would assume, more class work. You got to learn the ins and outs of the engines and the mechanical sides of the planes.
Yeah, well,
obviously, you probably didn't need to go as depth as the mechanics would, or did you?
Well, I originally was a mechanic.
Okay.
So it was easy for me to come back and fly as an engineer. I already had the training.
What plane were you assigned to?
B-24s originally, and later on we flew B-17s in combat.
Which plane did you prefer?
Well, I liked the 17. It was a good plane, very durable.
I interviewed a gentleman who was a pilot last week named Keith Anderson, and he said the same thing. He said he liked the 17 better than the 24.
I watched the shells go through the wing on it, and you wouldn't believe it would stay up. But they're a wonderful airplane. Yeah.
So when you were stationed in Jersey and you're going to school for mechanic school, you guys do cadence on the boardwalk at night, and then you were also during the blackouts. For those listening who don't realize this, even though the United States wasn't in direct contact with Germany, on our west coast and east coast we still had blackout drills where people turn out the lights. You would have your blackout curtains so that if there were ships out in the ocean, they had a harder time targeting targets of opportunity. And so when the coastline were blacked out, you had submarine patrol duty, is that correct?
Well, we walked the boardwalk looking for anything strange, and we were guards. Basically.
Look for U-boats or anything else?
Anything. We reported everything we saw, and it was up to the brass to know what to do after that. And we did a parade in New York.
Sure.
That was to build the morale up in people for the people.
Sure.
And
got to sell those war bonds.
So it was neat, but that was just to build the home army, build the morale up.
Yeah.
There's two armies. There's a home army, and then there's a foreign war.
Sure.
When you go into combat, you go into the foreign war. The home army, when you're overseas, you're directly at war. When you take off in the morning, you go right into enemy territory. You go right into Germany. You drop bombs on a picked target. But if you're in a home army, that's different. They couldn't fly from home.
Yeah.
Anywhere overseas.
Well, not to mention the fact that you need the home army to, and thank God at that time.
That's the backup army.
And not only that, but thank God we had production plants back then. Nowadays, we don't make anything here. Luckily, back then, we had train plants, car plants, tractor plants that we pulled to make all the equipment we need.
Yeah.
A few episodes back, I had on the archivist from the John Deere company. Yeah. And he was talking about how John Deere was making airplane parts and gun parts and all that. And so our entire industrial side of our country turned into that home army as well, not to mention the guys who were training, but the logistic army. You had to find people at the Dickies Uniform Company making uniforms and everything else. So a little while after you were stationed in New Jersey, you found yourself in Michigan, and you're working on the Pratt & Whitney program?
Well, Pratt & Whitney engine's a 14-cylinder radial engine, and the Wright engine's a 9-cylinder radial engine. And then the two engines at that time were in most of the planes.
Those engines, I mean, obviously by design to carry the amount of weight, because obviously the plane itself's not that heavy, but with the payload on there, the men on there, and the environment which they're going into, let alone the cold in the air, but the potential of getting shot and hit with flak and debris. By design, those things had to be workhorses. And I imagine they were almost over-engineered just to provide a little bit of protection on them?
You could run on 3. They were very dependable. The radial engines at that time were the engine.
Yeah.
So the only other engines that the fighters were using were V-12s. Rolls-Royce, that was built in England.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another one we built, but I can't think of it.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it either, but I guess it didn't perform as well as the Rolls-Royce engine.
Rolls-Royce was a better engine.
Yeah.
More power.
More power, more consistent.
Yeah. We were studying what an engine looks like when it has problems in it. We had engines set up and problems put in them, and sometimes they would throw a torque of flame out the back, 60, 80 feet, and we had them out on the river, so that we'd go out over the river, and we would try to analyze the problem by just looking at the problem with the result of the problem.
Sure, because when you're stationed in a 17 and you're at altitude and something happens to your engine, it's definitely beneficial to be able to look out the porthole and kind of make an estimate on what's going on with it by sight.
Well, in combat, if you lose an engine, you immediately feather it, turn the blades into the wind, so it's not doing any drag on the plane, and then put extra power on the outer engine, the one engine,
Sure.
in order so we'll fly straight, and then compensate otherwise, But it works.
Now, as your time in service progressed, much like a lot of the guys at the time, you get sent overseas, you get your combat missions, you find out where you're going. Do you remember the first place you were stationed when you went over to Europe?
Well, I was stationed in England, 90 miles north of London, Glatton, I believe and we flew out of there all the time after that. But the missions were short. We were just flying into France at first, and every day as they retreated, our missions got longer and longer. And after a while, we were flying round trip of 12 hours just to get into as far as they had backed up. And so it was getting longer and longer.
Obviously, early on in the war, your head's on a swivel. You're excited. It's all new to you. But as you fly more and more missions, and they're getting longer and longer, how do you keep yourself alert? And obviously, a lot of that's over friendly land the further we progress into the country, but that doesn't prevent the Luftwaffe from coming your way. So how do you guys stay alert and keep awake on those long
Well, all you do is fly and sleep.
Sleep in shifts?
Yeah, nothing else. When hours off, you rest, and then when the rest of the time you're in flight. And even on our days off, we flew practice runs. We were in the air all the time, and it is hard. It's twice as hard to work it in the air at high altitude as it is on the ground. So it's exhausting. When you go 12 hours, that's like 24 hours. But it's exhausting, so you have to be careful.
And I can imagine not only spending that time in the air, but you're also in those big leather and wool jackets and the pants, the insulated uniforms, right?
Yeah,
big gloves on.
We wore a mask, and the oxygen was the true hoses that were plugged into the dash, whatever we had, and that had to be careful. Once in a while, they'd fall out on you, and first thing you notice is it's getting dark, and you say, and then after a while you realize that lack of oxygen, your blood turns dark, and when you realize that's happening, you hunt for that oxygen hose and make sure it's plugged in. But it happened to me, and it was frightening. But finally, when it went together, it's like the lights came on.
Yeah.
And as my blood turned clear again. So it's always a risk. It's not like the modern pressurized hull and
pressurized suits.
Yeah, pressurized everything.
Yeah. everything's nice, streamlined, and ergonomic. Meanwhile, you got guys on 30 cal machine guns trying to load belts with big mittens on.
And our bathroom's a little pee tube and I don't think I ever used it, but
Yeah, but now is that built into the uniform, or is that something you kind of had to place in there gently?
it's just hanging on the wall.
Oh, okay.
We were all friends.
Sure. Well, I mean, at that point, you guys have been through basic training. Last thing you're worried about is someone seeing you undressed. I mean, they got that out of you quick.
Yeah, we don't have that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that electric sealer wire had electric wiring in it, and that was nice because it heated your body right in the suit.
Sure.
And that was because the ship was no heat in the ship. It wasn't pressurized, so that's the only heat you had. Electric suit.
How tall are you?
A half inch under 6 foot.
That's pretty tall for back then. I mean, it's pretty tall for nowadays too. And obviously, being somebody who's 6'5", you can understand the phrase "it's a short man's world." We're just living in it.
Well, I operated the turret, which is in the middle of the plane.
Yeah.
And the tail gunner, that's different. Now you need a small guy because you had to crawl back over to get to it.
Well, even as you go from one part of the plane to the other, you got to crawl through the bulkhead passages. And being a tall guy,
you can go all the way back, all except in the tail.
Yeah.
I mean, you can walk,
I just know at some
carefully.
I just know at some point in time you probably had to hit your head once or twice on those bulkheads.
It's funny.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful. You lose your balance. The windows are all open, so
oh yeah,
you don't want to fall out.
Especially if you're over by the.
Yeah, well, the two big back windows and they had guns in them.
Sure.
And we were oxygen masks and all, and we fire guns right on the windowsill, as you would say.
Now, one of the things, obviously, they don't express too much in the Hollywood movies and the TV shows is the lack of insulation in those planes, let alone the lack of any sort of muzzle protection coming off those machine guns. At the end of a long shift or a long battle with those machine guns going off, the engines rattling along, how did you deal with I'm sure you had to have extreme headaches, the ringing in your ears. I mean, how did you guys handle all that back then?
I was fortunate enough that we didn't do a lot of shooting. I mean, during the war, you didn't always shoot. You were shot at more than you did any shooting. And the shrapnel used to come up and
the flak.
Yeah, and it would hit the bottom of the ship, and it sounded like somebody threw something.
Like a handful of pebbles at a soda can.
Yeah. Well, I had a steel vest I wore, but I never wore it. I used to stand on it because everything was coming up.
Sure.
And the guy that before me said, "It ain't going to come in sideways. Stand on it," and I took his word for it.
How heavy were those early flak vests?
Pretty heavy, and there were steel pieces. But I didn't. I stood on it all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to do without carrying that around.
Sure, I can imagine.
Yeah, so it was a lot easier, and it was safer that way.
The first time you flew into flak fire, and then it hit your plane, whether it was major or, as you said, it losing its velocity and just bouncing off the plane, do you remember? Obviously, it's a long time ago, but do you have a recollection of your first thought when it happened? Like, we're into it now, or here we go?
What I remember all the time is we went over a little lower than normal. We were down around 10,000 feet, which we were usually over 20. And that gave the ground crew, the 88s, which the Germans were, they could reach us.
Sure.
And I watched the shells come up and go right through the wing. And they were going through 10 feet apart, or better, plus or minus. And when it got around and it came in, I heard it hit right near me, and then I fell down. And when I was laying on the floor, I had to check and see if I had anything left. But by some miracle, I was in one piece. And so after I checked myself out, and I crawled forward, and the pilot and co-pilot were 5 feet.
Yeah.
They were doing all right, I thought. Well, you missed it.
I think it's a great testament to the engineering of those planes. You see these photos, and I'm sure you've seen it in real life, where they're just, the tail fins almost completely gone.
I've seen pictures of B-17s with half the wing off.
And yet they make it home.
Yeah, they fly. They come home.
Half of the cockpit's gone, or the rear tail's gone.
Well, we have all big holes in ours. I know. One came through right next to me. Of course, I didn't see it, and it took the plexiglass out of the turret, and that got in my eyes. So I was on the floor. I was blind, and I thought I better make sure I'm in one piece, and my legs were there, you know. And by some miracle, I was all right. But it's frightening.
Did you receive a Purple Heart for that? Wasn't written up?
Nah, no hearts.
Yeah.
You got to go to the hospital for that.
No, you just wiped yourself off and went about your way, huh?
Yeah, well, I never even thought about that. Yeah, you don't fly with that in mind.
Yeah, sure.
I was just glad we were still in the air, get up front, Jack being the engineer, and help the pilot bring the plane home. So.
At any time, did you ever have the misfortune of having to bail out or lose a plane?
I never bailed out. I went through tests. They used to, on the ground, put a chute on you, rev the plane up, and pull the cord and drag it down the runway. But I never jumped out. I didn't like the way those chutes looked. They looked pretty ragged. But I think under the right conditions, I would have been next to the pilot.
You know, I've seen videos of the training, whether it's for the airborne or for the pilots, where they hook you guys up to the parachutes and turn on the fan.
Yeah, they do that out there for training.
And people think, well, that looks fun, but they don't realize that's got to bang you up. You got to get pretty bruised, and, hopefully there's no rocks out there, but anybody who's been drugged by a horse or anything knows that that's not a fun ride.
We were young, thank God,
Yeah.
And our bones were a little softer.
The skin's a little more pliable.
Now it would have killed me.
It would kill me, and I'm only 41. I'm not looking forward to it.
We were already 18.
And that's one of the things that stands out for me as I do this, and I have the pleasure to talk to people like George, is especially look like the photos of D-Day or the Marines landing in Guadalcanal. Sidney Phillips famously turned 17 years old on Guadalcanal.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's the children who win the war, who fight the wars.
Nowadays, you ask a 16-year-old to mow the grass, and it's, do I have to? You can't give an 18-year-old to help out around the house, let alone go out and defend the world. I mean, we were literally saved by high schoolers and college kids. And it's just so mind-boggling. Now, obviously, we got to adjust for life expectancy and all that, as famously George Washington first commanded his first troops at the age of 16, because, you got to adjust to life expectancy. But still, I mean, to go from being in high school, being a freshman in college, to, okay, you're going to boot camp. A lot of you guys never been out of your towns at that point. Next thing you know, you're on a train heading off to God knows where. And then you're over in Europe, flying, marching, driving tanks, what has it, and it's up to you to get the job done.
And they're only kids, really.
Well, you went there as kids. You guys came back as men, clearly.
I hope so.
Did you take the northern route? Oh, you didn't fly over. You were on the ship.
Yeah, we went over to Manhattan. It was the biggest boat, I think, the Marines had.
Yeah.
And my butt was right at the bow. They said, the Air Force don't get seasick. Almost died up there.
Yeah, they said the Air Force don't get seasick, and then the Navy guys like, we need the Marines to carry our sea bags.
Yeah, the Air Force was just becoming.
Sure.
And we were Army.
Army Air Corps.
Army Air Corps. And we were proud of that.
Absolutely.
And that was different.
You're dealing with rough seas, you're dealing with stale air. You probably want to get up on deck as much as you can, but clearly with rough seas, that's probably...
You know what the bow of the boat's like when it's going up and down. It goes up 10 feet and falls 20. Yeah. And we sat in the front of that thing, and I swear we're never going to make it.
Not to mention your racks were attached to the bulkhead on a hinge and then held up with chains. I imagine your racks would probably bounce up and down.
My radio man was so seasick, he kept throwing up, so I put him in the bottom. We had stacked beds, so I put him in the bottom and with his helmet. And everybody felt seasick, but some don't throw up.
Sure.
And, going to the mess hall sometimes is pretty hard to carry the food back. But you have to eat, whatever you can get down. But it's an experience. But we're all young, we're not soldiers, in the sense that we were well trained and we were all young.
Not to mention, granted that environment's completely different, but
Yeah.
Every young teenager has a little bit of a sense of a feeling of invincibility almost.
Well, you were taught to believe that you could win.
Yeah.
That was part of the training and your basic training. And all. You taught you're going to win. Yeah.
Because you had God on your side, God and country.
Yeah. Yeah, we felt eventually we're going to get it.
Yeah.
That seemed impossible at times, but we did it. We won it, so.
Well, luckily we had such great allies on our side. I mean, at the time we got involved in the war, I mean, Britain had been in combat since 39, 40. I mean, they're already 3 years in before we even got over there. 4 years in.
Well, I remember when the war stopped, I said to the radio man, how many missions we got? He said 30. Up to then, I didn't even know what mission we were on.
Because the quota was 34? I know it started out like at 25, and they kept raising it up.
At the end, you say that it was over, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, nobody was counting.
Sure.
Nobody said, oh, I'm going home after a mission. We were headed, the war was over.
Yeah.
And we were getting there, so we did pretty great.
I guess a lot of guys kind of took on the opinion or the feeling that when your number's up, your number's up. You just go out and do it and don't think about it too much.
Oh. Well, that's not a bad feeling. It's, you know, I never thought about it really. I just did the job I was trained to do, and that kept me alive. So, and
how many missions did you fly?
30 missions.
30 missions.
And each one was a target, and we got judged on how close we hit the targets and how well we bombed the areas and all. And we did very good.
I forget the name of the targeting systems they had back then, but those things were they were the top of the technology for the time.
Well, see, we were flying, and it got longer and longer the missions got.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, we got all the way into Berlin, and we had to go beyond Berlin, and we were running out of gas. So we flew ahead and went right into Russia, and we landed in Russia with their permission.
Yeah.
And they gassed us up so we could get back. That's how long they were getting. We didn't have enough fuel in those planes to do that. And then they fueled us up and we flew back.
Yeah, luckily they were on our side. I mean, Russia had their problems, but, you know, it's one of those things where we'll ignore your problems and take care of this one over here.
They were an ally then, so
yeah.
You know, I always heard about the big women and all, but here comes 3 women carrying a 3-blade propeller, one on each blade over the head. And I thought, holy mackerel, it's just what I heard somebody tell me one time. And I looked up and they had it up on the wing. They put the gas in, they filled the tanks, and we had women all doing all that because the men were all on the front lines. So, and I guess if it was here, it would be the same.
You know, regardless of what the politics are, it's nothing brings a group of people together, especially a nation, than being in a situation like that. We become united. It's the great reset button, if you will.
Yeah, it's amazing. We had to get up early enough to be briefed.
Yeah, you'd go into the flight briefing.
Yeah, we go into flight briefing, and that's before daylight.
Sure.
And when we got in there, they would, once they briefed you, and if you didn't go on that mission, you didn't leave there. They couldn't have that information leak out.
Sure.
It was that secret, and so that target had to be kept, because they'd made us there if they got that information.
I'm laughing a little bit because on last week's episode when I was interviewing Mr. Anderson, he said that they got up to do their flight briefing, and I guess it's somebody's job to go wake up the mess officers so they can start preparing the food, and that person failed to do so. And all the pilots like, we're not leaving until we get breakfast, and so they basically stayed there until the mess officer got up, prepared their breakfast, and they finally ate and left, but they refused. We're not going on this mission until we get some food in our stomach.
I can't, that's so long ago. We were still using mess kits. We didn't have a kitchen. We didn't have any of that. The English did, but the Americans didn't have it, so they were on field rations, and we would have to get up and get in line and walk up, and you have a metal tray. They put the stuff on. But on the way back, when we get home, it was different. Now it's hard to remember.
Is there any particular times when you're out on R&R, you got to get away from your base and go out?
What's R&R?
Okay, so you never had the opportunity to go out.
When we were going into combat, we were flying training.
Yeah.
We never stopped flying.
So you never got to visit anywhere while you were over there? You went to London at some point?
Yes, at one point. Yeah, I remember. They have an underground, like we do.
Sure. Subway?
Yeah, and you can go into London, but once you get back there, close to the base, you got to get a cab. They got a lot of cabbies, and you'd have. But the guy would always charge us. Like that was say $2 to the base. He charged each guy $2, and I.
Gouge you guys.
Yeah, they gouged us. I couldn't believe they did that. But
what was the old saying? The Americans are overpaid, oversexed, and over here.
And taken over.
Yep.
I met a young girl, and she invited me to come home and have dinner with them. And of course, I said, "Right, I'll be pleased."
Sure.
And they were very poor. I remember very nice people, very nice. And they told me that for dessert they're going to have marmalade. And I thought that was a big thing. Something they served for them. They were going to give me.
Well, not only that, but
they were so nice. They were so nice.
The fact that not only are they sharing their marmalade with you, but their food in itself. You're bringing home an extra mouth for the evening.
Yeah.
And they're on food rations just like we were back here.
Well, they treated me really wonderful, and I was glad to be fighting for nice people.
Now you were over there near the ending of the war. When you were in London, they've been getting bombed for quite a bit for quite a while. Did you see any of the devastation from the bombings, or were you more into the...
I don't know if I can remember this anymore. I was in London. You hear this noise, like a beep, 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 and everybody's running. But I don't know what we're running for. And that's one of them buzz bombs going over. And then after that, I knew hunt for a doorway or something. And I was a fighter went over, and I jumped in a doorway. And as he passed over, I heard a whistle, and this bomb came down and landed, a little bomb, scare bomb like, and landed, it must be 50 feet from me. And I was huddled in a doorway, and I thought, that's just a scare bomb. That wasn't big enough to hurt you.
Yeah.
And they were dropping that just to terrorize the people.
Well,
terrorized me.
Well, and that's one of the things the Germans were good about, is psychological warfare.
Psychological warfare.
I mean, you got this V1 and the V2 rockets that had distance and could cause devastation, but also just the sound, because jet engines, they invented them.
Well, that's the only time I got involved in a bombing.
Yeah.
I was on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But that was scary.
But those citizens, they would hear that scream of that rocket engine come over, and their whole life just had to stop until it was over.
Oh, when you hear that bomb coming down, screaming, a scream, wow, it takes your breath away. Because you don't know what to expect.
Sure.
We saw them coming. We were flying to a target, and they passed over us. Rockets going to England, and we just stay away from them, But I said, there they go. Send that rocket, and it's shaped like a big torpedo, and it was headed right for London. And I thought, wow. But usually you don't see them. They're up high, and they usually go very high, and they're scary. It was a scary war. For the people on the ground, it was frightening.
Yeah.
There was no place to hide.
Now, out of your 30 missions, obviously you guys bombed some targets of opportunity. You bombed manufacturing plants.
Usually targets.
Targets.
Yeah. Like we bombed a field that was a gas dump, and you couldn't tell it. But after the bombs went down, the whole ground came up, and we must have hit it.
Did it lift your plane up?
We could have collided.
Yeah, I just didn't know if the force helped you reach altitude quicker than normal.
I couldn't tell you right now.
Yeah.
That was frightening.
Yeah, I can imagine.
See the ground come up. The English flew all the night flights. They didn't do targets. They did cities, and of course that's how they were being treated.
Sure.
So they didn't think there was nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, at that point.
But we did targets, and it's really better to do targets. But see, they were doing over at night, so. They just you find a light on the ground, boys. Just hope it ain't your light. It ain't your light.
Yeah. And so, you're flying your missions. You're taking some hits. You've seen some 88s go through your wings, but luckily, as you stated before, you never had to bail out.
Yeah, we're bombing, and my job as flight engineer is make sure all the bomb bay's clear before we close the doors. And I look back and there's a bomb hanging on one pin. All the rest went out. And I told the pilot, I said, we got a bomb hanging on one pin. We had a guy that was trained in bombs. I said, send him back with me, we'll see what we can do. And I got back there, and I didn't know whether it spun out or not. It has a little wheel on it that spins. If it spun out, then I just hit it, it'll set it off.
Yeah.
So I didn't know. So we tied the propeller on it and strapped it down and tried to tie it in somehow. Well, we had to walk out on that little narrow platform in the bomb bay.
Little catwalk.
Yeah, it was about 6 inches wide. And, we had shoe on, oxygen, and a tank on our arm. We were at high altitude yet, so it was very hard to work like that. But
yeah.
And it was a big help having somebody come out and help me.
Sure.
If you're afraid of heights, you don't want to go.
Yeah.
I used to just look down. I wasn't afraid of heights. So
The whole bottom of the plane's open at that point.
if you fell out, you wouldn't have to worry.
Yeah.
So anyway, when we got it set well, best we could, then we softly started home, and we brought it back. That was a soft landing.
I think it was the longest ride home, huh?
Yeah, a long ride, and landed in an abandoned ship, and left the thing sitting on the side of the runway.
You ran out like there's a skunk in the privy, huh?
Yeah, get away. Who knows? It might have been that, might have spun out.
Yeah.
And so the ground crews had to take it out.
I bet they were waiting on you, huh?
They didn't want it either.
No. That's a rough job, EOD work.
Yeah, they had to go out and take the timer out of it, out of the one. Once you got that out, then it was safe to handle again. Oh well, it's all happened so quick. Yeah, things happen quick.
Sure. At a certain point, the word comes down that Hitler's dead, the war's over. What was your feeling? Do you remember? We were like, okay, on to the next thing, or you finally, or what was it like to get that news?
The trouble was, right before that, when they announced that, we went over. I guess they had news that we didn't hear, and we flew over low to hit targets, too low, and we got bombed apart. Shells were going right through the wing of the plane, and about 10 feet apart. They were going right through the wing, and that should never happen because we were way too low, and the Army itself has 88s, guns that can shoot that height, and somebody miscalculated, and we got shot up pretty good. But this was the end, and I hate to get killed on the last day, it just turns you over.
I read a book, it's called The Last Fighter Pilot, and I forget the pilot's name. He was the wingman for the main author of the story. They flew down in the Pacific, and the same thing happened to them. They had to go out and fly this last mission, but as they were up in the air, the Japanese signed a peace treaty, but they never got word.
Oh, yeah.
His wingman got shot down.
Wow.
He was, I think, 19 years old. To this day, he has the highest IQ ever of a pilot in the Air Force. And there's a famous actress now named Scarlett Johansson. It was her grandfather.
Wow.
He was the last pilot shot down, technically, even though the war had been ended.
Somebody didn't know what was going on, that's for sure. In fact, we were so because we were so low, they thought we could go over that low and do 2 missions. And he said, you go in, drop your bombs, and then come back, load again, and go out again. That never happened.
Yeah.
Usually we didn't eat there at all, but once in a while I'd have candy or something in my pocket. I used to carry a candy bar sometimes, so that when we come down from high altitude, we eat it.
They'd issue guys Hershey bars, wouldn't they?
Well, see, on high, we were on a MASH. We didn't have pressurized ships, so you couldn't eat anything. But when you come down on the way home, as soon as you get under, 8,000 feet, or then you could take the mask off and eat whatever you brought.
How would you deal with thirst at that altitude? Did you guys have insulated canteens, or would your water freeze? I mean, how would you're flying for 12 hours? I imagine you got to take a little bit of water at some point.
No water. Nobody mentioned it, so, and I couldn't get it in where I ought to get it.
Sure.
And you don't think about that. You just do it. Yeah.
Well,
As soon as we're all on the way back, then when we come down, then we get drink and get something. Don't you know?
yeah, it's amazing what you get used
We were young.
and you get used to not having access to certain things. I remember in Sid Phillips' book when he came home from the Pacific, he was at the mess hall at the base, and he went through line, and they had all these heads of iceberg lettuce, and no one's eating them. He just spent 3.5 years down in the Pacific, and him and his buddy just sat there and ate like 5 heads of lettuce themselves. Everybody's looking at them like they're crazy, but they said it had been so long since they had fresh greens, and not only that, but the water content. They just each sat there and went through like 5 heads of lettuce. And so it's crazy what you don't think about.
Yeah, a lot of things that didn't seem right, but basically we got it done anyway. Yeah. Well, the war ended, and they had a dinner served by prisoners of war, and you weren't allowed to talk to them, no questions. And they served us a nice steak, a nice dinner, and I was surprised how big they all were. All the prisoners looked big. You know,
Well, it's because we fed them better than their own armies did.
they look good, and you know, I'm German, and they were German. My grandfather came from Germany, so they were like me, I guess, but they were taller. But I won.
Yep. And that's, you know, yes, you had the Hitler Youth and you had the extreme brainwashed Nazis, but a lot of the guys for the Weimar Republic, they were captured from other armies and forced to fight, or they were drafted from the government. So, you know, a lot of those guys, they weren't suffering from the brainwashing or the indoctrination, but they were forced to fight, and so they were just doing what they had to do
Yeah.
to survive.
Well, the same in our army, you know.
Yeah.
If they send you in the combat area and you don't fight, they shoot you.
Yeah.
So that's the way it is, and you know that. So when they hand you the gun, the enemy's that way, and you better be shooting. And every army's like that. So
Yeah, I guess where we were lucky is we didn't suffer that the Russians did, and that was being so under-equipped that they would give one guy a rifle and some ammo, give the guy behind him some ammo, have him follow the other guy, and if he got shot, he just picked up his rifle and kept on going
Yeah.
because they were so underarmed. It's just,
I can't imagine that. No.
and even with the amount of weaponry we were giving them through the Lend-Lease program, that were still completely underserved. So the war's over, and you come home. The economy's different than when you left. The nation's probably a little different.
We had the combat crews had the first choice to get out early, and I was released not soon after I got home, and I came back into civilian life completely lost.
How do you come home from that? I mean, here you are, you're fresh out of high school, or some of the guys are, you know, left college.
Not easy.
You-
I tried to go back to school, machinist school, and that was terrible. Nothing went right, and they used to give me whatever I made, and plus they gave me an extra $100. I took the $100 and bought myself a used car. I was in the Air Force,
Sure.
so all I know is fighting, bombings, and shooting at other airplanes. So I never had that ground training. I had training, but I actually worked on the ground.
So you got back, you tried mechanic school, you weren't happy with it, you got yourself a late model car. Where'd you go next?
They tried to give me a bad car, and a friend of mine was a master mechanic, and he said, I guess I better talk to you about this. He said, the gentleman that spoke to him was one of your mechanics. His word is law. He can't lie. And he told a lie. So they said, wait a minute. They took the car and put a rebuild engine in it, told me it cost me $100 a month, and then we settled it.
There you go.
But I wouldn't have got that, I don't think.
Sure.
We didn't catch him trying to cheat, trying to give you the business. But, so that car, that Ford, I guess I went, had me for quite a while.
So what career did you get into after the war and after your military service?
Oh, what did I end up?
Yeah, what was your
I became a telephone man.
telephone man, huh?
Yeah, I worked for the telephone company for 35
Were
years.
you a lineman, or were you doing the lines in the house?
I did both. I started out on the frames, and then went out on the street and did regular house installation, and eventually I became called a PBX man, which it's all business,
The old 99 box, huh?
all systems, and that's how I spent most of my time putting business systems, which they don't even sell anymore.
Yep.
And it worked out pretty good.
I'm the modern day version of you. I do IT work. I run Cat 6 wire and do phone systems as well. So I basically have been upgrading a lot of those older phone systems that are in some of these older offices that no one can work on anymore.
So it was good. It all turned out all right. Eventually, it took time.
Yeah. Well, it's new technology too.
Yeah, I forget how many years it was before I really got settled in real good. But then I spent the rest of just putting systems in, which I liked to do anyway.
Yeah. At what point after the war did you end up getting married and having children and doing the whole family life?
I don't know. Let's see.
Now you're asking hard questions.
Nancy worked for the telephone company, and
We met 70 years ago.
yeah, and I met her at dance at that Oaks dance place, and I danced with her. And
Were you a good dancer? Was he a good dancer?
Yeah,
Hold his own?
yeah.
well, you had to be a good dancer in them days. That's the best way to meet the girls.
What was your favorite dance?
Oh no, I did. We
Jitterbug.
did.
Yeah, jitterbug.
Foxtrot?
Oh, I did the jitterbug, but I did the waltz, and regular two-step, which they did a lot. And but I used to do the.
We were married in 1951. Came out of the service in 45, so
You were working for the phone company as well?
yes, I worked in the office downtown
Nice.
in Philadelphia.
Flyers fans, huh?
I'm trying to remember where we lived at. That apartment.
Good thing I didn't wear my Penguins hat today.
That was a place.
Yeah.
Came with a refrigerator. The only thing that didn't work. And that was a low class.
If you have any piece of advice for any younger folk listening to this,
I don't know. Don't volunteer.
don't volunteer for anything.
I think they should make it mandatory that all kids should go in the service. Or I see the kids today.
Well, I will say there's a high school in my town. I live down in Cape Coral, and this particular high school has mandatory
ROTC.
ROTC, every student. Because when I grew up, they had to volunteer, and the people who did that sometimes when they had to wear the uniforms, the other kids would kind of make fun of them. But at this high school, everybody as a freshman has to go through it. And so the seniors, no one, there's no joking around because everybody's been through it. And then that whole school gets a little bit of that discipline. And I guess when you go there for graduation or any sort of school ceremony, there's ROTC guys there in the uniforms and doing the whole thing. And so it's really well put together.
That's cool.
Well, George, I appreciate your time.
I hope I remembered everything.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm sad because I almost wore my shirt today. Mine's a little bright, but you're wearing your beautiful Hawaiian shirt with the B-17s on it, and I picked one up out in Texas.
Yeah.
It has planes on it. Before you came home, were you able to finagle any souvenirs off of anybody to bring home with you?
No, I didn't bring any. I don't know. I got rid of most of it overseas. The reason was that I had a radio. I found a radio that was a field radio, and I thought, geez, that'd be a nice souvenir.
It's heavy.
Then I heard that some of the stuff was sabotaged, and if you just turned the right way, boom.
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe that's risky.
I didn't wear the.
That'd be my luck.
My grandfather worked grave registration, and the one thing that I got so far, because my uncle has a lot of the stuff, he brought back the first aid box that would mount up underneath the dashboard in the Jeeps, and so I have that he brought back.
Well,
Actually, he wouldn't go back for any of the trips to England. He didn't want to do it.
I have no need to see it all over again.
Yeah. It's kind of hard.
War's over, and this is my country,
Yeah.
and I fought for it. That's all.
And we all thank you for it.
I thank you guys for being that gracious. Very nice.
This has been a Digital 410 production.